Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday. It's 12. That means it is AMA, and I'm super excited for two reasons. First is this is the first AMA I'm doing from Facebook desktop. I finally got the capability, so we're testing it out. And also, I'm not just doing it on Facebook, I'm doing it on Instagram Live too. So playing around with that, and the reason I mention all of this while I'm starting the video is always be testing different channels and platforms. On Instagram, I have a pretty good following, so I'm testing actually doing the show in both places and seeing the response. So just wanted to start with that. Hey, Rima. And we're going to go ahead and dive into today's topic, which is all about professionalism. And this one is particularly relevant to me because it's been the topic of conversation with a lot of my clients lately. So I have a few different clients, and they're searching for vendors and partners to fulfill various roles. And the biggest thing that's come up while they've been screening and looking at them is a level of professionalism. And I was having this conversation with my boyfriend about, why is it that, there is, in my opinion, sometimes really, really prevalent unprofessionalism. And I think that I've narrowed it down to a few different reasons. So I'm just going to explore those today, why I think it's the case. You want to be looking to see if this is relevant to you, and then specific categories and channels that you use and communicate with in your daily business, and how you're either using them to exude professionalism, or are there ways you're not even realizing that by doing or not doing things, you're coming off a little too friendly and not as professional. So the reason I think that this happens, especially with small and one-person businesses, and I know this is certainly the case with myself, is when it is just you and you don't have employees or an office to be in front of all the time, it's very easy to slip into casual ways. So this can show up in everything from how you're communicating to how you're dressing. But the fact of the matter is, the great and the not so great part of having your own business is you are your own boss. And when somebody is not there telling you what the guidelines and the standards are, it's really easy to get a little lackadaisical with those sometimes. The second part of this is we're living in a world and a society where there is multiple different channels now to communicate with. It's come to my attention recently that texting has now overtaken email and calling as the most used format of communication. And when you think about this, texting is a platform that inherently fuels a certain level of familiarity, certain, what is the word I'm looking for, like acronyms or shorthanded responses. And while it's certainly easy to communicate with clients via text, you also want to make sure that you're instilling the same level of professionalism there. So I think one of it is it's in small businesses and one-person businesses, not because we're small, but because it starts with us. And when there are other people aren't around who are checking us on our professionalism, or that we feel like we have to show up in front of on a daily basis, it's easy to slide into maybe a little more of a lax, jovial approach. And then also, again, the streams of communication. So I'm just going to run through a few examples of how I've seen this show up for myself, including an example as early as this morning in the different areas that I started looking. So one of them was regarding a client, and we're in the middle of trying to get scheduling set up, and there's been a lot of back and forth. And they contacted me and let me know that there was a little bit of confusion with what my assistant had said to them and what was happening. Of course, I'm super aware of what's going on, and I wanted to handle it ASAP. Well, this was 7 p.m. in the evening, and I was about to walk into a seminar. I wasn't getting out until 10. So while I was in the seminar at 7, they had texted me, and I got out at 10 p.m. And of course, my initial reaction was, I want to get on top of this. I want to text them right back. And when I was talking to my boyfriend about it, I was getting ready to text them back, and he said, what are you doing? It's 10 p.m. If you were a business and you had office hours, texting a client at 10 p.m. would not necessarily be the most professional thing to do. It lets them know that you're available all the time. You're texting them, they may be asleep with their family, with their wives. They're getting text messages from you. Where are those boundaries? So it's definitely important to set boundaries. And like any other business, give yourself a start time and an end time and communicate that to clients. For myself, I'm exploring 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. After that, most likely, even if you're texting me, you're going to receive a response the next business day. again, it's hard for me to adhere to this to myself because I love being responsive. But what is happening when I am so responsive and what I'm not saying is, oh, okay, go ahead, text me, call me anytime, I'm at your beck and call. And that's really not helping me set a level of boundaries and just professionalism to it. So come up with working hours. The other thing is how you dress. For me, I was so excited when I started my business. When I was working in corporate America, I was wearing heels and dresses all the time and walking around the office. When I first started my business, I was like, this is great. I'm going to wear jeans and I'm going to wear shirts and it's, just regular blouses. I'll be at home a lot of the time working. And I would always make sure that I dressed up when I went to go meet clients. Now I have a client, I've been working with them for over a year. At this point, we're very, very familiar with each other. I trust them, they trust me. Their office and their employees are like my family. And I was getting ready to go help them with something this morning and I had on a turtleneck and jeans and I realized, regardless of how long I've been working with them, when I'm communicating with them, I am under the distinction of branding professional. Regardless of how long we've known each other, regardless of what the familiarity is, when I'm going there under the context of I'm here to help you in a professional capacity, it's probably going to be in my best interest to not opt for jeans and look at something like slacks. And that's what I ended up doing. I put on black slacks and heels and I went over there. And I really encourage you to take this even down to coffee meetings and more relaxed meetings that you're having with clients. Look, I'm not saying you have to be dressed to the nines all the time, but there is certainly something to say for your personal brand if that is the level you're carrying yourself at. And it's funny because when I was getting ready to quit my corporate job and start my business, I started reaching out and asking people, what are distinctions that you have of me and what is it that you think my brand image is, right? It's always good to ask people how they interpret you. And the one thing I will say I got consistently across the board was no matter what day it is, whether it's a casual day, a Friday, a Tuesday, you are always dressed and you always appear to be ready to take on the job. So again, professionalism starts with you. You want to look at the channels in which you're communicating, what times you're communicating, and then also how you're dressing. Now, back to the communication, I'll say this too. Even when you're on text, it is in your best interest to communicate in a way as if you were communicating on email. Again, it doesn't need to be paragraphs. You don't need to have formal signatures, but using shorthandedness or BC instead of because, even though we're at a point where it's kind of socially acceptable, you always want to be setting the bar for your professionalism. The truth is that people want to hire who they respect. They want to hire credible experts. So it's really nice to be liked by everybody and to have a nice joking rapport, but it's more important when it comes to your business and you're in the distinction of professional to set the tone of communication. And it's better to have that through and through and always be in a professional context, I would argue, than starting off with a personal one, because it's then really hard to go back and earn the respect. You need to start by commanding the respect and carry that through and through. So after watching this video, here's where I would encourage you to look if you're a one-person business. This is certainly the areas that I find myself slipping if I'm not super intentional about them. Channels of communication. Do you have set hours that your business operates, and do you communicate that to clients? Or are you texting them at 11, 12, 1 a.m.? Those things are undermining your credibility and also your peace of mind. You have to be able to be off. I know I struggle with this myself. Definitely look at the way that you're communicating. Again, are you using shorthand or super familiar jargon, or are you using more formal language? And then also be looking at how you dress in all situations. I really try and make sure if I'm meeting with a client, if I'm meeting with a prospect, I'm typically in heels, slacks, dress, skirt, business attire through and through. And the last thing I'll say is, again, you start to form relationships with clients. I certainly do. I love all my clients. I go to dinner with any one of them. I so enjoy working with them. It's really just a joy for me to work with my clients. And when I find myself sharing from my personal life, I really have to stop and check and see, what is the intention of the share? Is it something where I'm just making small talk or gossip, or is it something that's really pushing the engagement forward, bringing examples from my personal life into the engagement? If you get to a level where you're really, really personally sharing, and it may not be with the intention of moving an engagement forward, again, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but there's certainly a point that you can cross where boundaries get blurred, and it's like, are you the person that I'm hiring, or now are you a friend? And when you're in a professional context, I would argue that boundaries are something you want to be super, super, super aware of, and always setting the tone and being intentional with the boundaries that you have. So that is really my whole take on professionalism. Again, it's come up because I've had questions with clients about people that they saw were not at a level of professionalism. So we were talking about that, and I just thought it would be a really great topic to cover. I'm going to go ahead and answer a few questions here because I see that we have them, and then go and wind down. So Kate, let's see. Ben, hi. I found Kate, but what about when said boss doesn't have a grip on the modern client and is trying to coach on old school techniques? Oh, great question. Yes, so there's definitely something to say about not acknowledging certain channels of communication that exist now. I think this is really a disconnect that boomers and millennials have. Boomers assume that if millennials are on Facebook or LinkedIn or texting, that they're not being in communication. The reality is, certainly my generation, I'm a millennial, we're much more familiar with texting. I think that when that conversation is broached, it needs to be with communication on both sides. So I know as a millennial, I used to talk to my old boss. I was on Facebook a lot. Obviously, marketing is a role that I had in the business. The reality of it was that clients were reaching out to us on Facebook, and I don't think necessarily that was understood in the beginning. So I wanted to acknowledge the fact that this is the channel where these client communications are coming in. They're saying stuff on Twitter, they're saying stuff on Facebook. So it's happening, and showing him that this is not a channel that needs to be ignored, because at first, to be honest, they didn't want to allow any communication on Facebook, and we just looked extremely shut off to the outside world. And meeting in the middle and saying, okay, if it's going to start on Facebook, again, if we're going to handle it in a professional manner, we always push to get a phone number and an email just to get super clear, take it offline, and handle it in as professional as a format as possible. Again, Ben, we also had standards in place for how we communicated on Facebook messaging. So there was a myriad of people in the department who were in charge of handling Facebook messaging, even though it was Facebook. And now I'm talking about, a larger company, but there was protocol to, you're always using complete sentences, you're speaking with please and thank yous, you're always doing a salutation and a sign off. Just because it's Messenger does not mean that the level of professionalism in the communication should wane at all. So that's a great question. And then I'm taking your second one. I found that it lets people get it off their chest / to-do list. Just because they text you doesn't mean you have to respond during non-business hours. The same as a voicemail or email. Is that okay? Just because yeah, absolutely. There's clients that I have now, we're in an active engagement. If they're texting me on Sunday evening or 9 p.m., I usually let it slide, and then I don't let it slide. I intentionally don't answer until the next morning, and they know I will get back to them within the next business day, and I set those expectations. Now, it was hard to try this on for myself. I am super responsive. I mean, I always want to be on for my clients. I had a lot of anxiety. I have anxiety anyways, but I had a lot of anxiety about not answering texts and voicemails late at night. I would sit there and I would feel myself getting anxious, and my boyfriend would always stop me and say, look, I can tell you're freaking out, but what tone are you setting if you're answering this right now? You have to realize that by intentionally putting it off, you're actually setting boundaries instead of just feeling like you have to react to everything. So yeah, you definitely don't want to be chasing the carrot. You don't always want to be in this role where you're trying to please people. You need to set the expectations and level of communication that they have with you, so you can have a peace of mind. But again, what is it that you're inadvertently saying to clients if you're always on? And I would argue that not only does it make it seem like you're always available, but also that there's not a level of professionalism there. I mean, look, think of people you really, really admire. Really up there people, an Elon Musk, a Tony Robbins, a Gary Vaynerchuk. We might be audacious and text them, but no way would we ever expect them to immediately reply. I mean, they really run how you reach out to them. They're heavily gated. They have a lot of standards. They are not accessible, and they're at a prime level because they're not accessible. You have to realize that if you're always accessible, there's a level of premiumness with your brand you're giving up. people who are credible, who have been working for a while, who are really experts in their field, they are not ones that are going to respond within 5 seconds. So I would actually say that the more premium you're trying to place your brand, it's not that you're unavailable, but you definitely have rigor in the level of which you're allowing people to reach out to you. Rima says, do you tend to mirror the method of communications that your clients utilize? For example, if they seem to prefer phone calls and you prefer emails, will you default to phone calls for that particular client? So that's a great question. Always meet your client where you're at. Again, as long as there's a level of professionalism. Personally, for me, I love getting on the phone with people when there's confusion because it's easy to just clean that right up. And I hate voicemail. So I've trained my clients at this point where if you call and I'm not available, send me whatever you need to send me in an email. I'll get the gist, I'll read it, and I'll call you back. So you can set the expectations for how they reach out to you, but certainly if they prefer phone calls, when it actually comes time to having the conversation, I'm not going to carry that out on a 20 thread email. I'm just going to pick up the phone and call them. But they know when they reach out to me, if it goes to voicemail, send me a synopsis in a text, send me a synopsis in an email. Otherwise, I'm really not listening to the voicemail. And it's just like fact of the matter. I'd rather be much more upfront about it than let them think that I'm sitting here listening to their long-winded email. I'm just going to call them back. So yeah, I think that's all the questions we have. Again, the areas you want to look: communication, channels of communication, setting business hours for yourself as a one-person business, being really mindful in the manner of what you're communicating, even if you're on a channel like text message. How are you dressing? What is your professional appearance looking like? Even for things like coffee, again, I would say it's better to have a level of professional attire all the time than get yourself in a pattern where you're not dressing up for people. It's never going to be a bad thing for them to say, wow, you know, that Kate, that Rima, they always look sharp, really. I mean, they're always dressed to the nines. It's adding to your level of professionalism. And then again, keep in mind, accessibility. The more accessible you are, the more premium of a quality you're trading. So it's not that you have to be unavailable, but definitely don't make yourself overtly accessible because you're going to drive yourself crazy, always trying to keep up with it, and you're letting people know, oh, it's okay to bombard me at any time of the day. So that is my message on professionalism. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments. Even if you're not watching this live, I always go back and answer them. I'm going to recap what I answered here to the questions in the comment section. If you have any thoughts, or if you're seeing an area where it looks like, you know, the opportunity for professionalism can be stepped up, or you're seeing trends where people aren't, I would love to hear that too. Otherwise, I hope you have a great Tuesday, and I will see